A very warm welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We would like to say thank you to everyone who's sent through mails as well as their compliments and suggestions that they have for future Toolbox talks, as well as the questions that many of you have been sending through. We want to just say thank you to you as the audience, because really the importance of health and safety rests with each one of us, and we do understand that not all of us have access to all of these resources and knowledge all the time. So we please invite you to share as much as you can with us so that we can take this information and share it with the rest of the audience as well, and perhaps some others who might not have the successes that you are having. Really, this is a joint effort that we are trying to achieve without anybody losing or getting injured in the industry. This is really what we are trying to achieve. And we want to say thank you very much to FEM and IOPSA for sponsoring this Toolbox talk. So this morning we are discussing feet and why feet are important and why we should be protecting our feet. Now, we're not specifically talking about safety boots. We're talking about protecting our feet in general, but in particularly, we are going to be looking at some of the tasks that you perform and why it's important during these tasks to actually look after your feet. Because as you see there, if our feet don't get the attention they need, chronic problems, in other words, future problems, can develop, and this will trouble you for years to come. Now, whether you're walking or running or exercising or even just standing, having feet that are comfortable and well cared for rather than aching or paining feet makes the entire experience a lot more pleasant. Now, we might not think of it right now. Maybe your feet are not paining, they're not giving you any hassles, and so you don't think about it. And they often say, out of sight, out of mind. This time also, out of mind, out of mind. If it's not really hurting you and you're not thinking about it, you're not really considering the benefits of it. We always remember how good it is to feel healthy when we are sick, and that's the problem. Humans wake up in the morning, we feel okay, but we don't realize that we actually are feeling very good until we start feeling ill. And then we long to feel better again. And this is the same with our feet. The problem is our feet can cause a lot of other issues. It can cause head injuries, headaches. It can cause tension. It can cause a lot of back problems. In fact, a lot of spinal problems as well, because our feet, basically the basis or the foundation of our body, can cause a lot of other injuries later on. So looking after our feet or taking care of our feet is extremely important. But you might ask yourself, well, is it really that serious? Well, when it comes to work-related injuries, there are two major categories that we look at. The first category is injuries from punctures or crushing, sprains, and lacerations. Now, this obviously comes from heavy-duty works. That is why we always suggest having steel-toe boots while working on sites. Many of us are not required to wear these boots because we are visiting sites, and many times we get away with just walking around a site without a safety boot on. Well, is that right? Not at all. You see, we are still exposed to the risks and hazards on that site. And so the site itself, not the task, should be specific to certain PPE that should be worn, which means if we are walking onto a site that requires foot protection for employees working on that site, well, then the site should require that and not the task. So we do also want to remember that our risk assessment specific to our task will outline what types of personal protective equipment or PPE that we should be wearing. And in particular, we want to make it task specific. But we do not want to forget that the site where we are working in should also require certain personal protective equipment, unless it is barricaded off to the outside world. Oftentimes we get to a site, it could be in a corporate company's property that has been cordoned off. We're not expecting all the employees of that corporate company to wear personal protective equipment because they're not going to come into contact with the work being performed. But if you are an auditor and you are going to site in order to go into the area of work, although you are not performing the work, we are going to require you to wear the correct PPE on that site. If you're coming to do an inspection, perhaps you are the owner of a company and you feel according to your authority on that site, you are over and above what regulations are required instead of employees. Please, we are going to require you as well to wear PPE. Regardless of whether you want to or not, it is a requirement to protect us from injuries on site. So please remember, when we're speaking about PPE on a site, specifically in this case, we are looking at foot protection or safety boots. We are requiring it for a site. When it comes to a task that we are performing, perhaps at a private home, nobody's there to check whether we have our PPE on. Do our safety regulations and standards become a little bit more relaxed? Well, the task we are performing might still require us to wear the correct PPE. And in this case, again, we are talking about foot protection. Is it a requirement in your risk assessment for that task for you to wear safety boots? So remember, if there is the possibility of having a puncture or crushing or sprain or a laceration injury, then it is a requirement to wear the correct PPE. Now, the second group of injuries includes those resulting from slips, trips, and falls. Now, they do not always result in foot injury, but if we do not give attention to foot safety, then the occurrence of these injuries will increase. In other words, if we are not constantly monitoring the types of tasks that we are doing and include the environmental conditions or the working conditions on a specific site, we call this site-specific hazards or site-specific risks, then we might forget to include things like slipping, tripping, or falling. And these all have an impact on our feet. Now, these two categories that we are discussing today do not exhaust the whole range of foot problems at work. So we're just looking at these two because we have only a few minutes to discuss a toolbox talk for the week. But there are other conditions or other areas where foot protection will also come into play. Now, things like calluses or ingrown toenails or just tired feet are common amongst many workers. Oftentimes we get home and we just want to put our feet up. It's an expression of speech, but it's said that way because majority of the time, whether you're driving or sitting or standing, generally your feet are going to take a big punch. And so, although all of these injuries that we are discussing are not necessarily in the stricter sense considered occupational injuries, they can have serious consequences for health and safety in the workplace. Well, why do we say that? Well, let's say you do not have to stand while doing your current work. Perhaps you work in the reception area, or perhaps you work in an administrative position and there's not much walking or standing that you have to do, or not much physical work like on site, like some of your teams that are plumbers have to be doing all the time, walking up and down, climbing on ladders, climbing on scaffolding, etc. But just the general day-to-day use of your feet might give you pain, discomfort, or fatigue. Now, as we mentioned, this might not be caused by the task that you're performing, but because of your relative condition of your health, this fatigue can set up the worker for further injuries, such as affecting your muscles or your joints. And a worker who is tired or suffering pain is obviously less alert and more likely to act unsafely. Now, an accident or an incident of any kind may result from that. So because we are concentrating on the pain or the discomfort that we are currently in, we might not be able to see clearly the risks and hazards that are around us, even in a situation where we are not physically performing work on site. We could even be sitting behind a desk working at a computer. But if we are discomforted or in pain, or perhaps we are fatigued, we might be less alert to risks and hazards that are around us. In fact, that discomfort and pain could even be the risk that we are going to be facing. So what are some symptoms you might face? Depends on the type of work you're doing, but some of the symptoms you might face is severely aching feet, blisters, calluses, corns, rheumatism, arthritis, malformations of toes, fallen arches, which is flat feet, bunions, sprains. All of these symptoms come from these specific causes: long periods of standing, hard flooring, and poorly fitted footwear. Now you might think, well, long standing, that's obvious. Many of us, when we stand, we start feeling the pressure on our feet. Hard flooring, yes, we agree with that. Sometimes even the shoes we're wearing are not comfortable. But poorly fitted footwear, do we really give this much consideration? What about the use of high heels and the long duration that we might be working in high heels during our working period? What about pointed shoes, ones that do not give sufficient or enough space inside the shoes for our toes? The lack of arch support, so perhaps the type of shoe we are using does not have the correct insole to protect our arches. And then too loose or too tight fitting footwear. Now these are all causes of severe foot pain, and this will start affecting the rest of our body, start affecting musculoskeletal injuries, as well as long-term injuries on our legs and muscles. Now, if you're having sweaty feet or fungal infections such as athlete's foot, this is when it is hot or humid environments or strenuous work where you are going to obviously start sweating in your shoes. And then that is footwear with synthetic or non-porous uppers. Now, this is where we want to stop and mention most shoes that you are going to be wearing for work, and this is for you as a plumber, you are going to be wearing shoes that generally are non-porous, and this is because you need to have waterproofed footwear during the types of work or the types of scopes that you are going to be working in, specifically in trenches or excavations, or even generally on a site. They require you to wear safety boots. Now, common foot problems occur both on and off the job. So there is no doubt that some work-related factors will lead to foot problems, especially jobs that require long periods of standing. But since the human foot is designed for mobility, that is working all the time and moving around, maintaining an upright stance is extremely tiring. In other words, standing for hours, day after day, not only tires your feet, but it can also cause permanent damage. Now, continuous standing can cause the joints of bones of the feet to become misaligned. This is what we call flat feet. Now, there's many other different diagnoses depending on the doctor that you're going to see, but it can cause inflammation, and later it can lead to rheumatism or arthritis later in your life. So what are we really saying here? Depending on the symptom you're having, there could be many underlying causes. You might be having rheumatism in your joints or your knees or your legs, and this might be a condition or an underlying cause of long periods of standing, walking, or standing on hard flooring, or perhaps the footwear that you are wearing is poorly fitted. Either it does not allow for your feet to breathe, it is too loose, or it is too tight. So although it might not be job specific, we might be not looking after our feet even outside of the workplace that later causes danger while we are actually working. But really what you want to hear is, can this all be prevented? Yes, we all suffer with sore feet time and time again. The type of work we do, walking long hours on site, doing a lot of audits on site. We are constantly walking or standing, and many of us who are doing strenuous work, a lot of plumbing work that we have to do is sometimes very, very strenuous, and this takes a toll on our body. So can it be prevented? Well, what we are going to say is there's no workplace where a worker is immune to foot injury. Regardless of sitting behind a desk, driving, working on site, working at heights, working in trenches, performing your tasks, there is no workplace where you are immune to foot injury. It just depends on the severity of the injury you are going to face. So because the hazards differ according to the workplace and types of tasks you're doing, the very first step in preventing foot injury in the future is developing a strategy to reduce foot problems. Now, how do you do that? Well, the very first thing you need to do is identify the hazards in the workplace. Are the hazards going to create an environment that will injure or damage your feet? Now, you might think, well, this is going a little bit too much in depth. Well, not necessarily. You see, you know your scope of work and you know the type of tasks you're doing. But do you know the distance to and from the work site? Do you know how often you have to walk back and forth? Do you know the duration of time standing while performing that task? Most of the time, it's about 100%. Some tasks you might be laying on your back, working underneath something to do the plumbing, but you will still need to get up, stand up, drive, walk to the bakkie, walk back to the area of work. Carrying things will create a little bit more pressure. So, in other words, almost all of your work has a measure of risk on your feet. And so, your risk assessment should automatically cover foot injury. Now, your hazard should be assessed in each workplace, no matter how safe or how dangerous it may seem. And we want to put emphasis on no matter how safe it may seem. You may think that working behind a desk, working on a computer, working in an administration may not have such a high effect on your feet. Well, each individual is different as well. And so we need to arrange our risk assessment not just around the task, but also around the employee and the comfort of that employee. And this is where the ergonomics regulations that have just recently been updated are really going to make a very big impact in terms of health and safety for every single employer. You see, ergonomics is the design or the work area design and the employee's comfort during those tasks. In other words, how comfortable is it for that employee to work, and what types of chronic or future illnesses can that person experience because of the type of work that they are doing? Now, foot injuries can be prevented, and this is through measures not just of PPE. So please remember, we're not just looking at saying, well, get them a little bit more comfortable shoes. That is a great way of doing it. It's a brilliant preventative measure, and please try and do that where you can. But we are looking at proper job or workplace design. That is one of the first things we need to look at. Now, what does this actually mean? Well, designing a workplace basically is saying that you want to fit the right person to the right task, but also you want to make sure that that person fits in to the task. In other words, you're making it not just safe for that person, but comfortable for that person. Well, how can we do this? Well, let's say a person has to stand for long periods of time. Well, is there a possibility that we can adjust the workstation to be more comfortable so that the PC that he's working on is a little bit more eye level and he's not having to slouch over? If we're working behind a desk, is the support of the chair that we are using giving enough support ergonomically or to the musculoskeletal system in order for the person not to create or to have injuries on their body? Perhaps somebody that is standing will have a foot mat underneath them that is like a gel pad or some sort of cushion type of mat that you use, ergo mats that are often available in the industry, where the person is not standing on a hard floor all the time. So these job design or workplace design helps us first before we identify proper footwear. So what should we really then know about the footwear after we've designed the environment or the workplace around our employee? Well, proper footwear must not only be comfortable, but it must also be specific to the task or the risk assessment for that task. Now, improper footwear can aggravate existing foot problems. Now, unfortunately, being fashionable sometimes takes precedence over choosing well-fitting or supportive safety footwear. And this is across the board. Many of us want to look good. We feel good when we look good, and that's a very important factor for confidence and for doing your work better. If you feel good, obviously it's going to be reflect in your work. But we do not want you to forget that comfort will also help you to work safer. Now, why do we say that? Again, if you are in pain and you feel discomfort, you are not really going to be focusing on the task. You're going to be focusing on that pain. So try and choose well-fitting, supportive footwear and not only fashionable ones. Many safety footwear manufacturers produce safety wear that does look fashionable, but that obviously comes at a price. So if it's not in the budget, we will choose, our precedents will be choosing well-fitting and supportive footwear over fashionable footwear. If you do have the money for it and the budget allows you to do it, well, then you can look for manufacturers who offer you both safe footwear as well as good-looking footwear. But the best way to involve a worker in programs to protect their feet are through three things. Number one, training and information on the hazards of wearing improper shoes. So have a toolbox talk every now and then based on this very information. Then, do you have a safe operating procedure or a safe purchasing procedure on the principles for selecting proper shoes? Or do we only rely on the risk assessment to tell us we need to have safety boots or gum boots? Is there a procedure, a flow chart on how we purchase the correct PPE for the tasks we are performing? And then, do you have simple rules for general foot care? Is there something where when you've issued PPE, specifically in this case safety boots or safety footwear, are you giving some simple rules of general foot care to your employees? This goes a far way in training and informing employees on how to look after their feet. And we're going to give you a few today. Now, if you want the slideshow or the information in the slideshow, we can give it to you in PDF. So please don't hesitate to ask us. We can send this through to you, and you can use this as a printout if you want to put on your notice HSE boards or to maybe email to all of your employees. But here are some basic foot care guidelines. Number one, don't ignore foot pain. If you are having pain in your feet, it's not normal. All right, so any pain in your feet is not normal. Contact your doctor as soon as you can. Inspect your feet regularly. So when you're bathing, when you're showering, oftentimes we don't look at our feet. We obviously want to wash it, but pay attention to changes in color or temperature. Look for thick or discolored nails, which is a sign of developing fungus. Check for cracks or cuts in the skin, peeling or scaling on the soles of your feet, which will indicate athlete's foot. Any growth on the foot is not considered normal. So please, we want to keep our feet healthy. Wash your feet regularly, especially in between your toes, and be sure to dry them completely. When you trim your toenails and you're trimming them straight across, please do not cut them too short. This can also damage the foot or the toe area and create areas where fungus can grow. So be careful not to cut too close to the corners or on the sides. This will also create ingrown toenails. If you have diabetes or poor circulation or heart problems, you should obviously not treat your own feet because you are more prone to infection. You do need to get a specialist advice on this. So please go and see your medical practitioner. Then make sure your shoes fit properly. Now, if you're buying new shoes, purchase them later in the day. This is where your feet tend to be a little bit larger. Obviously, they swell a little bit during the course of the day. So purchase them late in the afternoon. So when you fit them on, you are fitting on shoes that already have your feet slightly larger or slightly more swollen. Then replace worn shoes as soon as possible. Select the right shoe for the activity that you are performing. So gum boots when you are working in trenches. Alternate shoes. Now this is a very important one. Don't wear the same pair of shoes every day. Now you might say, well, how's that possible? I've only been given one pair of safety boots. How can I change my shoes every day? Well, it is the requirement of the employer to provide free of charge a pair of safety boots to you as an employee. Is there anything in the law written that you cannot purchase a second pair yourself? No, it doesn't say that anywhere in the law. You are allowed to buy your own pair of shoes, safety boots, if you want, and the employer can help you to do so, perhaps they're getting a discounted rate, or you can purchase them from your employer as well. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to give you 2 pairs of shoes, but just because they don't, does it mean you shouldn't buy your own? Well, whose feet are going to be protected? Yours. A few $100 for another pair of safety boots for an entire year. Remember, your safety boots should last you at least a year, depending on the tasks you're performing. But in that year, if you are alternating your shoes, you will find that the pain will subside very quickly, because we are not wearing the same pair of shoes. We are allowing them, obviously, for the sole, the memory foam of the sole, the in shoe, will allow it to come back the next day, and also it's going to air itself out. Then be cautious when using home remedies. We prefer to say self-treatment can often turn a minor problem into a major one. Please just see a physician. Go to a medical practitioner. If you are diabetic, contact your doctor and schedule checkups at least once a year. So again, if you want this information, please reach out to us and we will be sure to share it with you. And if you have any questions, perhaps on foot protection, or maybe something that you are facing, a symptom, we will not share it with anyone else. We'd like to hear from you as well. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing everybody next week for ergonomics, where we're going to discuss the latest regulations that have been issued and how it is affecting all of us in the industry currently. So thank you very much and have a safe week further.